The sun hung low over the cracked earth of augury, casting golden light over a village that had not seen rain in 2 seasons. Dust rose with every footstep, and the wells spoke only in echoes. The fields had long since surrendered, and the once booming drumbeats of harvest had grown silent. But amidst the brutal silence of dying crops and weary hearts lived a girl who walked like the storm clouds her people prayed for. Her name was Nala. 17 seasons old, she had the kind of gaze that made even elders pause. There was something unruly in her stare, not disrespect, no, but an ancient daring, as if she could remember lives before her own. She was slender, barefoot, and her skin glowed the color of wet mahogany when the dusk light kissed it. While others bowed their heads in supplication, Nala lifted her chin, as though challenging the heavens to see her. In a village where girls were taught silence and smallness, Nala was neither. She lived with her father, a man once strong but now bent with years, disappointment, and a pride that had curdled into bitterness. His name was Olaka, and he spoke of boys as gifts and girls as burdens. A daughter is a mouth that eats what she cannot hunt, he often muttered when Nala walked by. Once, he had many goats and land that breathed, but drought had stripped him bare, and in his hunger, he sharpened his anger on the nearest thing that still breathed, his daughter. Yet Nala never cowered. Her strength came not from her father but from the stories her mother once told. Before the sickness took her, Mama Zifa would sit under the moon and tell Nala tales, of skywalking queens, trees that spoke in riddles, and spirits that rode on wind. She would trace patterns on Nala's palm, whispering, "You were born on a thunder night. Fire lives in you. Remember that when they try to douse it." Zifa had left behind only one thing, a polished calabash, carved with symbols Nala could not yet read but had memorized by heart. She kept it beside her sleeping mat and spoke to it when the wind howled like grieving spirits. When her belly growled, when Olaka's scorn sat too heavy, when the villagers talked of marriage like it was a transaction, Nala pressed the calabash to her chest and remembered her mother's voice. Lately, the dreams had returned. Each night, she stood by a river that shimmered with stars, not water. Across the bank stood a figure cloaked in feathers and shadows. A man, no, not just a man, a presence. Though his face was never clear, she knew he wore a crown. Not one of gold or iron, but one shaped from stories and time. He would reach out a hand to her, saying nothing, and Nala would wake with her fists clenched and sweat on her brow. She told no one about the dreams. Not even Mara, the only girl in the village who dared laugh like thunder and called Nala sister of the wind. Some things, Nala believed, had to be protected in silence. But there was something shifting in the air now. The birds had stopped nesting near the trees. Goats refused to go near the northern trail. And Nala, as she stared into the empty horizon beyond the last hut of the village, felt a pull, an ache in her bones as though something, or someone, was coming. Not for the village. For her. It was on the 3rd morning after the dream that the stranger came. The sky was overcast, not with rain clouds but with heat, thick, stifling, pressing down on augury like a warning. The goats bleated nervously. The wind carried no song, no scent of storm. It was the kind of morning when change arrives wearing quiet footsteps. He came not on a horse but walking, his sandals soft against the baked earth. He wore a long cloak the color of old ash, with a hood that cast shadows over his face. Around his neck hung a leather pouch that swayed as he moved. He said nothing to the children who stopped playing to stare, nor to the elders watching from under their porches. He walked straight to the center of the village, to the house of the chief. His presence stirred whispers. Some said he was a traitor from the west, others claimed he was a seer or a spirit disguised as man. But no one dared stop him. Something about his gait suggested purpose. Power. Chief Dabari emerged, lips stained from kola nut, robes dusty from his morning rest. He raised a skeptical brow at the visitor, but said with performative warmth, "You've walked a long way, stranger. Speak your desire." The man reached into his pouch and pulled out a folded cloth. When he opened it, the sun struck 20 gleaming cowries, each smooth, pale, and unblemished. A rare sight. Currency of old. In a time where food had more value than coin, this was no small offer. "I seek a girl," the man said in a voice that was neither low nor loud, but carried like drumbeat. "One with strength in her eyes. I was told she lives here." The villagers leaned in. A hush fell. "A girl? For 20 cowries?" Olaka pushed through the crowd. "My daughter has fire in her eyes. Her name is Nala," he said quickly, greed cracking through his voice like a whip. "She is strong. Smart. She carries water, grinds millet, weaves better than any." "She talks too much," muttered an elder nearby. "She thinks too much," added another. "But she works hard," Olaka insisted, wiping sweat from his brow. "You will find no better girl." Nala, who had been by the river pounding cassava, heard the commotion too late. By the time she arrived at the square, the deal had been made. 20 cowries gleamed in her father's open palm. Chief Dabari nodded solemnly, as though this were a divine exchange. The villagers murmured in envy and awe. 20 cowries, someone whispered. "Just for her? Maybe she's a chosen one. She's lucky. Most girls just get sent away." Lucky. The word burned. Nala stood at the edge of the crowd, heart hammering. She wanted to scream, but her throat closed. Her eyes met the stranger's, calm, unreadable. Not cruel. Not kind. Just watching. "You sold me," she finally asked her father. "You'll be fed. Housed. Better than dying here, useless," Olaka said, avoiding her gaze. "This is a good thing." Chief Dabari signaled to 2 women, who stepped forward with a length of rope. It was not rough like twine, but woven with red and white beads, symbolic, ceremonial, binding. Not for livestock. For agreements. One woman held Nala's wrist, the other tied the rope. It wasn't tight, but it burned like betrayal. "You cannot do this," she whispered. But her voice was lost in the wave of nodding heads, in the rhythm of hands clapping for the transaction. No one looked at her face, only at the cowries. The stranger turned and began walking. A gentle tug on the rope told Nala it was time. She looked once more at her father, but he had already turned away, counting the shells like treasure. Mara stood at a distance, frozen, helpless. As she followed the cloaked man out of the village, barefoot and bound, Nala didn't cry. Her face was still. But her fire hadn't gone out. It had just been moved. The world beyond Agari was whiter and quieter than Nala had imagined. As she walked behind the stranger, her wrists still bound by the beaded rope, the silence pressed in like a second skin. The village disappeared quickly behind them, swallowed by a wall of dust. In its place rose dry lands that stretched like brittle parchment, interrupted only by crooked trees and jagged rocks. The sun bore down like judgment. Her feet blistered, and her throat ached for water. Still, the stranger did not slow. He walked with the assurance of someone who belonged to the land, his cloak undisturbed by the wind, his steps certain even when no path was visible. He did not speak unless he chose to. When he did, it was often in riddles. "Why does the hawk fly low when the earth is dry?" he asked once, not turning back. "I don't know," Nala muttered, still angry, still burning. "To see which bones remember rain," he answered. Another time he asked, "What feeds the lion after the hunt?" "Meat," she said, too tired for his games. "No," he said. "Memory." She said nothing to that. But part of her, the part that had once clung to her mother's lap during firelight tales, listened carefully. At night, they camped beneath leafless trees or beside silent stones. The stranger built no fire. He didn't need warmth, it seemed. Instead, he would sit cross-legged and unwrap a small bundle from his leather pouch. He never let her see it fully, but Nala glimpsed the edge of polished metal, the glint of something shaped and sacred. He would polish it with a cloth, eyes distant, as though remembering something far beyond her reach. On the 4th night, she dared ask, "What is it you carry?" "A memory," he said. "A weapon," she pressed. "A truth." And that was all. Still, her fear of him began to shift. He had not struck her, not tied her hands tighter, not shouted or threatened. He gave her water before he drank himself. When a thorn pierced her heel, he stopped without complaint and let her rest. There was a quiet patience in him that was unfamiliar, unsettling. Not gentle, but purposeful. She remembered then the tales her mother used to tell, of royal spirits who wore the clothes of beggars, kings who hid among the broken to find those with eyes strong enough to see through disguise. Power wears rags when the world forgets its name, Mama Zifa would say. Only those who've been wounded can see the shine beneath. And Nala, for the first time, wondered if she was walking beside such a figure. On the 6th night, the stranger left the bundle half unwrapped, perhaps on purpose. In the moonlight, she saw what he had been polishing, a golden circlet, worn but unmistakable. A crown, though smaller than the ones in children's drawings, fitted for travel, not display. Its surface was etched with symbols she didn't recognize but felt somehow drawn to. The air felt heavier then, as if the truth had stepped into the clearing. He noticed her staring but said nothing. Just rewrapped it carefully and tucked it away. That night, as she lay awake beneath the stars, her body sore and her mind racing, Nala could not sleep. Her anger was cooling, reshaped into something else, curiosity, perhaps. Or awe. The dreams returned, stronger now, and clearer. The same crowned figure stood across a starlit river, but this time, he spoke, "Do not be afraid of where the path ends. Fear only what you refuse to see." When she awoke, she was no longer sure she had been sold. She began to wonder if she had been summoned. On the morning of the 10th day, they reached the edge of the dust. The land began to change as if a spell had been lifted. Trees grew thicker, greener. The air, once hot and dry, grew cool and heavy with scent, wet leaves, unfamiliar flowers, the faint musk of distant rain. Birds called out in strange songs, and the soil beneath Nala's feet darkened with life. It was as though they had crossed an invisible threshold. The stranger paused near a towering rock face, where a cascade of vines hung like curtains. Behind them, the sound of rushing water grew louder. Without a word, he parted the vines and stepped through. Nala hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. Beyond the vines, a waterfall thundered down a cliff, pouring into a mist-shrouded basin. The water shimmered unnaturally, almost silver, almost light. There was no path around it. "We go through," the stranger said, for the first time offering his hand. Nala didn't take it. She clenched her jaw and stepped into the water's edge, letting the mist soak her skin. He walked ahead, disappearing into the cascade. For a moment, she panicked, then she followed. On the other side, the world bloomed open. A vast green valley spread before her, hidden entirely from the outside world. The trees here grew taller, older, more proud. Rivers wove through the land like blue veins. Distant huts with thatched roofs rested beside terraced gardens, and children's laughter echoed from unseen corners. There was music in the air, drums carried by the breeze, soft and slow. Smoke curled from clay ovens. It was not a mirage. It was a kingdom. "A Banji," the stranger said softly. "The land that forgets nothing." Nala stared. "This place, it's real?" He nodded. "Hidden by choice. Known only to the bloodline of fire and river." The villagers began to appear, silently. They emerged from tree-shaded paths, from behind tall grasses, faces painted with white clay in intricate swirls. They bowed their heads, not to her, but to the man she had followed. The man she thought had bought her. He removed his cloak then, slowly, as though shedding a skin. Beneath it, he wore robes of deep indigo embroidered with gold thread and cowrie shell. Around his neck hung a carved pendant in the shape of a lion. His wrists bore thin silver cuffs. The final gesture was simple but earth-shaking. He reached into his leather pouch and removed the crown, polished and whole, and placed it on his head. Gasps broke from the crowd. "Prince Kamau," someone whispered. "He has returned." Nala's legs stiffened. Her heartbeat surged with fury and confusion. "You lied to me," she said, loud enough to silence the whispers. You bought me like a goat. I tested you, he replied calmly. To see what you would do with anger, with silence, with fear. She stepped back. You think because you walked me through dust and trees, I'll forget the rope on my wrists? That I'll fall at your feet now because there are waterfalls and music? I never asked you to fall, Kamau said, voice even. I ask you to rise. Do not speak in riddles now, she snapped. Speak like a man, not a prince, not a ghost. Why me? He looked at her, not with power, not with pity, but with gravity. My mother dreamed of you. Before she died, she said I would find a girl with fire in her eyes. Not to marry. Not to save. But to follow. To build something new. I have no interest in a wife who is quiet. I need a queen who can break stone with her stare. The words settled in the space between them. But Nala did not smile. She yanked the beaded rope from her wrist and threw it at his feet. Then you should have come with flowers. Not cowries. And with that, she turned and walked into the village alone. She did not belong to any man. Prince or not, she would decide what came next. The sun rose softly over Abanji, casting long golden shadows across its lush fields and carved stone paths. Nala sat beneath a fig tree at the edge of the village, arms wrapped around her knees, her jaw clenched. She had slept little. The songs of the village, the drums, the chants, the whispering trees, were beautiful, yes, but they unsettled her. They made her feel watched. Seen. As if the land itself were listening for her thoughts. Kamau came without guards or fanfare, wearing only a simple tunic and a thin cord around his waist. His face, no longer hidden beneath a hood, was younger than she remembered. But his eyes, they carried centuries. You still burn, he said, kneeling beside her. Because I am not yours, she said plainly. And I am not impressed by crowns. I never wanted your submission, Nala, he replied. Only your truth. She turned to him, tired of riddles, tired of feeling out of place. Then let me go. He studied her face for a long time. Then nodded. You may leave, if you choose. But our elders have asked something first. A chance for Abanji to recognize you, not as a guest, but as a fire reborn. She narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? 3 trials. Given only to those the spirits mark as potential flame-bearers. Flame-bearers? Those born to reign without needing thrones. You are free to decline. But if you pass them, this land, and its future, may bend with your voice. She hesitated, her breath catching at the gravity in his tone. She had never wanted power, but something inside her stirred at the thought of being more than a girl sold for cowries. What are these trials? She asked. Kamau stood, voice deepening. Carry fire without burning. Tame a wild horse with only your voice. Make the elders weep without using words. Nala's heart pounded. She could say no. She could leave. But something in her bones, something older than her memory, rose like smoke. She stood. Then let it begin. The first trial was held at night. In the sacred grove of Anwa, a large bowl of flame sat in the center of a ring of stones. Kamau stood beside it, along with the elder priestess Aduma, her eyes milky with age. You must carry this fire, Aduma said, from here to the gate of Abanji. Bare hands. No cloth. No magic. Only belief. The flames danced wildly, red gold and alive. Nala stepped forward, sweat already prickling at her skin. The villagers watched in silence, some afraid, others expectant. She reached into the bowl. The fire leapt up her arms, but did not consume her. It flickered around her fingers, kissing her skin without pain. She gasped, staggered, but held firm. The flames obeyed her rhythm. She walked through the grove, through the village, to the gate. By the time she arrived, the fire had dimmed into a soft golden glow. The people murmured. Some fell to their knees. She carries the blood of Zifa, one whispered. She is of the old ways. The second trial was given the next dawn. Abanji's wild stallion, Ebony, had never been broken. No reins, no saddles, no rider. The beast stood at the edge of the open field, black as night, muscles twitching beneath his skin. "You may not touch him," Kamau said. "Only your voice." Nala stepped into the grass. The horse pawed the ground, snorting, watching her with wild eyes. She began to hum, not knowing why, an old tune her mother once sang during storms. Low, slow, steady. The horse flinched. Stilled. She sang louder, the melody winding through the air like a spell. And slowly, impossibly, Ebony took a step forward. Then another. And then, he bowed his head. The villagers gasped. Even Kamau seemed stunned. But the third trial still remained. She was brought before the circle of elders, 9 men and women who had watched over Abanji for decades. She was to make them weep. Without words. Without song. Without trickery. Only with presence. For hours she stood before them, saying nothing. The crowd grew restless. Then, she did the only thing she could. She took her mother's calabash from her side, held it gently in her palms, and knelt before the elders. She opened it. Inside was only earth, simple, dry soil from augury. She pressed her forehead to it. She let them see her. Not her strength. Not her fire. But her grief. The eldest woman, eyes clouded with time, began to weep. One by one, others followed, soft tears that carried memory, not pity. Nala had not spoken. But her silence spoke generations. 2 trials passed. 1 half fulfilled. The land waited to see what came next. The night air in Abanji turned colder after the second trial. A stillness settled over the village, not from fear, but reverence. Nala felt it in her bones, something watching, waiting. The people moved around her more carefully now, not out of fear, but wonder. The girl who had once been sold for 20 cowries now carried fire in her hands and called wild beasts with lullabies. But the third trial still hung in the air, unfinished, as if the land itself needed closure. That night, Nala slept beside the sacred fig tree where her journey had first shifted. Her mother's calabash was nestled beneath her head like a pillow. The moon stood high, bright, silver as bone. And in her sleep, the world opened. She found herself in a space that wasn't earth nor sky, a dream world of blue mist and glowing leaves. Figures shimmered in the haze, tall, cloaked in animal skins, with eyes like burning coals. These were not human. Not fully. They were the ancestors. The guardians of Abanji. Of her bloodline. Of the forgotten. One stepped forward, a woman cloaked in patterned indigo, bare feet rooted into the ground like tree roots. Her face was gentle, yet eternal. "Child of Zifa," she said, though her lips never moved. "You carry the silence of those who came before. It is not weakness. It is a thunder without sound." Nala opened her mouth to speak, but the woman lifted a hand. "You were born to move hearts, not with voice, but with presence. With truth that lives in gesture, in breath, in gaze. Your mother knew this. She sang not just with sound, but with stillness." The mist around them pulsed softly. Another ancestor, a man with a lion's mane of gray hair, added, "The last trial was never about performance. It was about memory. And memory lives not in words, but in the soul." The woman stepped closer and touched Nala's forehead. "You have already passed. But now, you must show the people." As quickly as they had come, the ancestors faded. The dream dissolved like fog in the sun. When Nala woke, dawn had not yet broken. But she felt different, full and still. Her hands no longer trembled. Her silence no longer felt like a cage. It was a river. And it would carry meaning if she allowed it. That evening, a fire was lit in the village center. The elders gathered again, curious, expectant. Kamau stood in the crowd, eyes fixed on her. Nala stepped into the ring of firelight. She said nothing. She took her mother's calabash and placed it gently in the center. Then she began to move. Not a dance of celebration. Not one taught by others. But something raw. Each step a memory. Each turn a story. Her arms mimicked the storms of her childhood. Her fingers traced the shape of loss. Her spine curled like the old trees from her village, bowed but unbroken. She became the drought, the betrayal, the fire. She became her mother, and herself, and all the women who had never been heard. The village fell silent. And then, tears. From the elders. From the mothers. Even from Kamau. She did not speak. But no one would ever forget what she had said. The fire from the night before still lingered in the air like a spell, warming the morning dew. Abanji had changed. Not just the people, but the very soil. Birds sang differently. Children followed Nala wherever she went, mimicking her dance with laughter and wonder. The elders whispered her name like a song too sacred to sing aloud. But Nala remained quiet. Her silence was no longer defiance. It had become something else, an understanding. A force. The villagers looked at her with awe, but she remained rooted in her questions. What had all this been for? Why her? Why like this? That afternoon, Kamau summoned her to the sacred pool, the place where the ancestors were said to speak most clearly. The sun hovered low, casting long shadows across the water. He stood there alone, holding something wrapped in black cloth. Nala approached, her bare feet soundless against the stone. He bowed slightly, not in power, but respect. For the first time since they met, his gaze softened completely. "It's time you knew the whole truth," he said quietly. She crossed her arms but said nothing. Kamau unfolded the black cloth, revealing a small pouch. He reached into it and poured 20 cowries into his palm. They shimmered in the golden light, clean, polished, glowing as if they held something more than mere trade value. "These," he said, "were never meant to buy you. I never owned you. I never could." Nala stared at the shells, unmoved. "They were symbolic," Kamau continued. "A message. A key. My mother, Queen Asha, was a seer. Before she died, she told me that my path would not be like the other princes. She said, 'Your queen will not come with songs and silks. She will come through fire, with eyes that burn. You will not woo her. You will witness her. And she will wear her pain like a crown you must earn.'" He let the cowries fall into the water, where they sank without a sound. "I disguised myself. Left the palace. Walked among the desperate. Not to find a servant, but to find the girl who could change the kingdom. The girl who would change me." Nala's breath tightened. "You could have told me this before tying ropes around my wrists." Kamau nodded slowly. "And if I had, would you have believed me? Or thought it was another trick of power?" Silence. He stepped closer, not reaching for her, just standing beside her, equal. "I came with a crown, but it wasn't mine to wear until you gave it meaning. And now, you have a choice." He pointed to a carved chest at the edge of the water. Inside it, gold rings, rare beads, silken cloths, coins from across distant lands. "You can leave today," he said. "Take this and return to your people, not as someone sold, but as someone sought. Wealth will follow you. Power, too. Or..." He turned back to face her. "You can stay. Rule this land beside me. Not beneath me. Not behind me. Beside me. I offer no promises of ease, but of legacy. Of stories sung in your name long after we're both gone." Nala looked at the chest, then at the prince. Then down at her own hands, still calloused from the journey, still stained with ash from the fire she had carried. She thought of her mother's calabash. Of the trials. Of the ancestors' eyes watching from the trees. Of the silence that had grown into thunder. Her silence wasn't submission. It was her answer. She stepped forward, but not to the chest. She stood beside Kamau. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. But the earth beneath them seemed to exhale. The crown, at last, had found its match. The day after Kamau's offer, Nala rose before the sun. The village still slept, but her heart did not. It beat with a rhythm she hadn't felt before, a deep, ancient thrum like drums under the earth. She had stood beside a prince, had carried fire, tamed wildness, and made silence weep. But now she needed something older than crowns and cowries. She needed her mother. With her mother's calabash in hand, Nala wrapped herself in a plain shawl and left the village unnoticed, heading toward the sacred forest beyond Abanji's eastern cliffs. The villagers rarely went there, too many stories of spirits and shadows, but Nala felt no fear. The trees welcomed her, whispering in tongues her soul understood even if her mind did not. The deeper she walked, the quieter the world became. Birds hushed. Leaves stilled. Light moved differently here, not above her, but around her, like it too had come seeking something. She reached a small clearing, where the ground was soft and the air smelled of roots and rain. It was the place they had said her mother's ashes were scattered, carried here by women of augury who had believed in the old ways. Nala knelt and placed the calabash on the soil. "I don't know what to choose," she whispered, not with her lips, but in her heart. "Is ruling still mine if I never asked for it?" A wind stirred, though the trees did not move. The air thickened, golden dust rising like breath from the earth. Then, from the shimmer, a figure emerged, a woman formed of bark and bone, sunlight and shadow. Her eyes were endless. "Do not bow," the spirit said, her voice like a river through stone. "You already carry the sky in your spine." Nala's eyes widened, but she remained still, breath caught between fear and awe. "You came to ask what queens are made of," the spirit said. "But you already know. A queen is not crowned. She awakens." Nala felt the words land not on her ears, but inside her chest. The forest spirit stepped closer and reached toward her forehead, not touching, but pulling something from within. The air shimmered again, and a vision unfolded. Nala stood tall, older, wrapped in flowing cloths with the symbol of fire and water woven into her hem. Behind her stretched a line of girls, strong, bold, beautiful, carrying tools, books, baskets, and drums. She saw herself leading them not with commands, but with conviction. They crossed deserts, seas, and cities, opening schools, planting fields, freeing women from chains invisible and real. She wasn't just a queen. She was a movement. The vision faded, and Nala found herself alone again in the forest, but no longer uncertain. The wind was still. Her pulse was not. She picked up the calabash and whispered a thank you to the roots, to the spirit, to her mother. Then she turned and walked back toward Abanji. Not to accept a crown, but to answer a calling. The sun hung high when Nala returned to the village that once sold her. But this time, she did not come in silence or sorrow. She arrived on horseback, side by side with Prince Kamau, flanked by his royal guards draped in deep green robes and bronze armor that shimmered like dawn. Behind them followed gifts, supplies, scrolls, and builders, a procession not of conquest, but of restoration. The village of augury had not changed much. The drought had lessened, but the fields still cracked. The huts leaned from age. And the same people who had watched Nala be tied with beaded rope now stared in disbelief. Some ran into their homes, others dropped to their knees as the dust of royal horses swirled around them. Nala dismounted before the central hut where her father once sat counting cowries. He stood now, older than she remembered, thinner, with a limp in his left leg. His eyes met hers, not with power, not with pride, but shame. He stepped forward, opened his mouth, but no words came. Then he fell to his knees. "My daughter," he whispered, trembling. "I sold you." Nala walked to him slowly. The villagers held their breath, expecting anger, retribution, judgment. But she knelt before him, lifted his face gently, and said nothing. Only silence, the same silence that once bound her, now spoke of release. "I forgive you," her eyes said. And he wept. Kamau stood back, allowing her to lead. This was her moment, her land. She turned to the villagers, many who had mocked her defiance, many who had called her lucky when she was chained. "I was not bought," she finally said, her voice calm, steady, carrying through the air like rain after fire. "I was chosen, not because I was meek, but because I remembered who I was even when others forgot." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "With Prince Kamau's help," she continued, "I bring news, your village's debts are forgiven. Your land is your own again. Your harvests will be restored." More murmurs. Then cheers. Then disbelief turned to joy. "But this is not enough," she added. "Not for me. Not for our daughters." She pointed to a cleared piece of land near the center of the village. "There, we will build a school. Not just for letters and numbers, but for wisdom. For stories. For leadership. For fire. No girl here will grow up believing she is a burden." A group of young girls peeked from behind huts, eyes wide, faces lit with new dreams. Nala motioned them forward. They gathered at her feet like seedlings reaching for sun. Kamau stepped beside her, smiling. "She leads not by title, but by truth." A new sign was erected at the village entrance days later, carved from redwood and painted with gold dust. Ibiala, it read. The reborn land. And beneath it, where girls are never sold, only raised. The sky blushed with soft orange light as the first rays of dawn broke across the kingdom of Abanji. Birds stirred in the trees, and drums began to beat low and steady, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The entire village gathered in a wide circle around the ancient baobab tree, its great arms stretching toward the heavens, as if it too had come to witness history. At the center stood Nala. She was dressed not in silks from distant lands, but in cloth woven by the women of Agari, dyed with earth tones and streaked with crimson, the color of courage. Around her neck hung her mother's calabash, now sealed with gold. Her head was bare, waiting. And in her eyes was a stillness far deeper than the river. The royal elders stepped forward, carrying the ceremonial crown, a circlet made of gold, cowries, and carved wood, pieces from her past, her trials, her journey. It was unlike any crown worn before in Abanji. It carried stories, not status. Kamau approached her, wearing a simple tunic of green and bronze. He bowed deeply, not to a wife, but to a ruler. "To the one who taught me that power is not an inheritance, but in integrity," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "To the one who walked through fire, and carried it without burning others. To the queen not made by marriage, but by memory." He knelt before her. Nala lifted the crown with both hands. Her fingers did not tremble. She placed it gently on her own head. Then, after a moment, she lowered it again, and placed a second, matching crown on Kamau's. Twin thrones were brought forward, one carved from stone and inlaid with vines, the other from wood, adorned with cowries and brass. They were placed side by side beneath the baobab tree. Nala sat first. Kamau followed. The crowd erupted into cheers, ululations, songs that shook the branches above. Women raised their children toward the thrones. Elders touched the soil in blessing. Somewhere in the distance, a white egret took flight, a sign of renewal. But Nala didn't smile for the crowd. She looked toward the horizon, where the sun rose gently, slowly, as if bowing to her too. There were no chains now. No ropes. Only legacy. She ruled not as a bride who had been bought, but as a sovereign soul, awakened, risen, and now seated in power not alone, but in balance. And beneath the great baobab, Abanji began a new chapter, one crowned not in gold alone, but in fire, spirit, and the quiet strength of a girl who had once been sold, but had never been broken. The sky above Abanji was clear when Nala made her first decree as queen. She stood in the open courtyard before the royal assembly, not behind a veil, not on a platform above her people, but eye to eye with them. Kamau sat beside her, silent and steady, the two thrones casting equal shadows across the stone. Villagers from Agari, Abanji, and neighboring lands had gathered to hear her words. Among them were the daughters once dismissed, the mothers once silenced, and the elders who remembered a time before trade replaced truth. Nala's voice rang out, steady and sure, with the same fire she once carried in her chest on the journey through the dust lands. No girl, she declared, shall ever be sold for any price, not for cowries, not for grain, not for favor or fear. A silence fell, deep, sacred. From this day forward, she continued, daughters shall not be bartered like animals. They are not burdens. They are not debts. They are legacies. Gasps turned to tears in the crowd, not from disbelief, but from long-awaited justice. For many women, it was the law they had begged the winds to bring, a law their own mothers never lived to see. Nala went on. Every daughter born within the reach of our kingdom's rivers shall be registered, named, and protected by decree. Every girl shall be offered education. And not just in numbers and letters, but in the history of women. In leadership. In language. In law. In her power. Behind her stood 10 women, elders chosen from different villages, different tribes, each carrying wisdom shaped not by titles, but by experience. Some were midwives. Others, herbalists. One had once been a slave who escaped and became a teacher. Another had led a hidden network rescuing sold girls for years. I will not rule alone, Nala said. These women will form the circle of mothers, an eternal council to guide the next generation of queens, and kings who know how to listen. One by one, the women stepped forward. They carried staffs carved with their own stories, symbols of healing, of resistance, of knowledge. Each dipped her staff into a bowl of sacred river water, raising it toward the crowd. The crowd followed, raising their hands in return. Some cried. Some laughed. All felt something shift, like an old spell breaking. From that day forward, the villages began to change. Fathers taught their daughters how to read the stars, not just sow the fields. Mothers taught their sons how to honor a woman's voice as a map, not a threat. Girls who once walked with eyes downcast now ran through markets holding books. Nala renamed the law itself. No longer the price of a daughter. It was now the flame of the daughters, a legal fire passed from queen to queen, never to be extinguished. And so, the past did not disappear. But it was rewritten, by those who had survived it. Under Nala's rule, the age of selling daughters ended. And the age of raising leaders began. The night was thick with stars when Nala rode alone into the hills beyond Abanji, to a place spoken of only in myths, songs, and whispers, the market of spirits. It was said to appear only to those who ruled with heart over hand, where the ancient dead traded not in goods or gold, but in memory, prophecy, and wisdom. She followed a narrow path lined with stones that hummed beneath her feet. With each step, the air grew sweeter, more alive, as if the wind itself was watching. At the edge of a hidden valley, the ground opened to light. Stalls carved from bone and bark glowed faintly in the darkness. Lanterns floated above without flame. No one spoke, yet the place pulsed with voices. Figures drifted through, spirits of old queens, forgotten teachers, warriors whose names had been stolen by time. They didn't look at her, not with eyes, but they saw her. Acknowledged her. Accepted her. Nala wandered the market slowly, her hands folded before her, heart pounding. At one stall, an old man with empty sockets offered her a feather from a bird that had never been caught. At another, a child's spirit gave her a riddle that vanished as soon as she heard it. And then, she saw her. Across the square, a woman stood tall and glowing, her face soft with the warmth of every childhood memory Nala had locked away. Her mother wore the same wrap she once danced in by firelight, the same beads Nala used to play with as a child. Tears blurred Nala's vision, but her mother's smile cleared them. I never left you, the spirit whispered. I became the voice inside you. Nala stepped forward. She wanted to fall into her mother's arms, but the woman only reached up, holding something between her fingers. The final jewel. A deep blue stone, smooth as water, shimmering with an inner light. She placed it gently at the center of Nala's crown. Then she stepped back. Go, she said. You were never sold. You were summoned. The market faded behind her, the spirits turning like smoke in wind. Nala walked away lighter, her crown now complete, not with wealth, but with purpose. And she never looked back. Epilogue: The Girl of 20 Cowries, 500 words. The fire crackled as the storyteller leaned forward, eyes gleaming with age and mischief. Children sat wide-eyed in a circle, their fingers sticky with fruit, their hair braided with shells. "You've heard of queens born in palaces," he said, "and warriors raised in gold. But have you heard of the girl who was sold for 20 cowries?" Gasps from the children. One boy snorted. "That's not enough for even a chicken." The old man laughed. "Exactly. They thought they bought her, but what they got was history." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he poured 20 cowries onto the earth, each one catching the firelight, soft and ghostly. She was not a servant. She was not a slave. She was a seed. The children leaned in. She became a queen with 2 thrones. She changed the law with her silence. She made kings kneel, not from power, but from truth. The fire popped. "Remember this, little ones, those cowries bought nothing. But they awaken everything." He stood slowly, brushing dust from his robe. The children remained quiet, thoughtful. Then, a small girl, perhaps 6, with big curious eyes, reached forward. She picked up 1 cowrie. And gently, she placed it on her head, like a crown. The storyteller smiled. The flame danced. And somewhere far away, beneath a baobab tree, a queen's spirit stirred, watching the future take root.